You are now listening to KRAN's podcast, Stories Without Limits. Thank you for tuning in.
Welcome, everybody, to the latest KRAN podcast, Stories Without Limits. This is a little bit different because rather than Roshan hosting, it will be myself, Dr. Razia Sharif, CEO of Kent Refugee Action Network. And we are honoured today to be joined by Rabbi Baroness Julia Neuberger. Before we begin, I want to reflect for a moment on some of your history, if that's okay. So your mother arrived in Britain in 1937, and she was welcomed here as a refugee. And because of that welcome, your family were able to rebuild their lives here in the UK. And you're a testament to the achievements that you've been able to rise to, given everything that has happened in your family's history. But what seems to be heartbreaking, I think, is that in today's policies, um, refugees and asylum seekers, and specifically young people that we work with at KRAN, um, are maybe not able to have the same kind of opportunities to be able to thrive. So I'd like to start by looking back a little bit on that. And I'm aware that in honor of your parents, you were a founder of the Walter and Liesel Schwab Trust, which has a focus on education for young refugees, which is one of KRAN's main services. Could you talk a little bit about the trust and why you're so passionate about that area?
Yeah, absolutely. So, as you just said, my mother came as an asylum seeker, actually, in 1937 from Nazi Germany, because basically any opportunities she might have had were gradually being taken away, and things were getting much worse. She was 22, and she came as one of the only ways you could come by then as a domestic servant. And she went to an amazing family. My mother was useless at housework. I think it's very important to say that this was a way of getting people in.
Yeah.
It only emerged after her death that the family who took her in, who had no particular connection, were just completely wonderful people in Birmingham, took 20 young women as domestic servants between 1937 and 1939, kept them for a month to 6 weeks, and then sent them on their way getting access to education or whatever it was. So they sent my mother to LSE,
Ah.
which was an extraordinary thing to do.
Mhm.
And she didn't actually stay for very long because she wanted to get her brother, who was 10 years younger, still at school in Germany, out. And this was after Kristallnacht, the night of broken glass, when things became very rough. He was 13 by this stage, and she got him to the UK. As a young person, you couldn't be a charge upon the state. There was no state support. So
Wow.
she had to find ways of earning enough money to support him and find
Yeah.
people to support him.
Uh-huh.
So that was on my mother's side. There's a history. So she eventually got her parents out too, but most of the rest of that family perished. And my father's family had come as economic migrants at the beginning of the 20th century. My paternal grandmother chaired the welfare committee of the refugee committee in the 1930s and
Wow.
1940s. So, and my father worked for his mother for a bit. So both sides of the family have a
Yeah.
strong involvement in refugee and asylum
Yeah.
issues,
Yes.
and both of them, both my parents felt strongly that if asylum seekers stroke refugees were to have a chance, we needed to give them access to education.
Yes.
And however you gave them access to education, it was the way that people would get a chance to restart their lives or continue their lives, or should they have the misfortune to be sent back, at least they would go back with an education. So that it was a really strong view held by my parents, but they didn't get involved in that. When my mum died, having said she had no money at all, she left enough money for us to start this off. But the most remarkable thing is not that we started it off, but the number of people who have contributed to it without ever being asked.
Lovely. Lovely.
People who have a family history somewhat similar to mine,
Yeah.
and people who just feel it's really important to do this. So we've had the most unlikely people setting up scholarships, funding scholarships. So we have some named scholarships in memory of people.
Oh, wonderful.
And we just have thought, what can you do? We can't do much to improve the lot of young asylum seekers in this country as a small charity. But what we can do is send a certain number of people to university and give them a start. And that seems the best we can do.
Absolutely, absolutely. It's wonderful. And we have some of our young people we've supported, who've gone on to college and then gone on to university and then come back with a master's, beaming and shining and getting on with their career and their lives. And it's just wonderful to see, given everything
It's
that they've
making
got.
a life, isn't it? It's making
Absolutely.
a life. And it's making
Absolutely.
a life and being able to use your mind
Yeah.
and being able to, if you like, use the often horrible experiences you've had
Yeah.
to somehow frame your intellectual thought. I think it's really important.
Absolutely. And, it just demonstrate the potential that's there, that they aren't just refugees. They are people who've survived, who are resilient, who have overcome so much. And they just have those ambitions and that potential, which just needs to be supported in order for them to be able to thrive, which is it's part of what we do as KRAN. Yeah.
Yeah,
So,
well, I feel really strongly. And I also think that there are quite a lot of people who've been through really horrible things, but in a way that's brought out their resilience. So they're absolutely
absolutely.
determined
Yeah.
to they're
Yeah.
determined to succeed. And it's wonderful to be able to help that.
Absolutely, absolutely agree with you. We're on the same page on that one. But so recently, obviously, there was the Border Security, Asylum and Immigration Bill, which is about to pass. And you spoke very eloquently about that in the House of Lords around the age assessment process and making amendments to that. And then also the challenge of using AI. Could you share a little bit with the audience about why that's so important to you?
Yes, so the various reasons. This goes back a long time. So the previous governments have been increasingly concerned, and this is part of the, if you like, anti-asylum seeker general conversation, that they've been increasingly concerned about people pretending to be children
Mm.
on the basis that if you pretend to be a child, you are then entitled to various forms of protection and
Yes.
support.
Yeah.
And so the more the conversation becomes negative about asylum seekers, the more the accusation is that there are large numbers of people trying to do that. Now, of course, there are a few, there
Yeah.
will be. And
Always.
also, there's
Yeah.
some people who don't actually know how old they are.
No, absolutely.
But it isn't as huge an issue as those who are the opponents want to make it seem.
Mm.
However, because this has become such a kind of issue, it's been going on now for getting on, well, 15 years, I suppose.
Yeah.
The previous government particularly wanted to use what they called scientific methods
Mm-hmm.
for establishing the
Remember that.
age of a young person.
Yeah, the
And
biometrics
this is,
and things like
but
that.
well, yeah, biometrics and particularly the use of X-ray.
Yeah.
And the use of X-ray, so it's either dental X-rays
Yeah.
or
Or
it's
bone.
X-rays
Yeah.
of particularly wrist bones, but other bones too, on the basis that this can tell you the age of somebody.
Mm-hmm.
Now, medical expertise tells you that this is not the case. It's pretty
Absolutely.
inaccurate. If you listen to Baroness Butler Sloss, who used to be head of the family division and knows about children, just a few things about children, she will say, go and meet a group of young people from different backgrounds, and you'll have a 14-year-old boy with a beard,
Yeah.
and you'll have a puny little white guy, who's probably 21, and he still looks like he's about 12.
Yeah.
So, you know what? It doesn't work.
Yeah,
But the
absolutely.
other thing, and the reason I feel so strongly, is not only that it doesn't work, although that's a really pretty damning argument, but also that it's completely unethical
Yeah.
to subject anybody to
Yeah.
X-ray unless it is for their own benefit. I know it's minimum radiation, but it's
Yeah.
unnecessary radiation, so you wouldn't do it.
Yeah.
And so I feel passionately opposed. Now, this government, to its credit, is not suggesting using X-ray anymore. I mean, that's not to suggest it won't come back. Who knows? But at the moment, they're not suggesting that. What they are instead suggesting is the use of AI facial recognition techniques, which have undoubtedly improved and come on leaps and bounds, but are still moderately inaccurate. And where, if you like, the sort of doubt is at least 2 years in either direction. So it's not very accurate for age assessment. Now, what they're doing, and to be fair, they've said they're going to come back to us. There's a whole group of us, by the way, who don't agree on this. And you probably saw from the Hansard of the Lord's debate, you've got Baroness Butler Sloss, and you've got Baroness Hamway, and you've got Baroness Lister, and you've got Alf Dubs, and you've got me. I mean, you've got lots of people all saying the same thing. Basically, we are waiting to hear what techniques exactly they're going to use, and they have promised to come back to us. And this is under development, so we don't know the detail yet. But we are, if you like, putting a marker down to say we need to be convinced
Yeah.
that this is sufficiently accurate and that this isn't going to lead to the same dispute as we've had about the use of scientific methods. But to their credit, no mention of X-ray at the moment.
Yeah, so on the kind of biometrics front, I remember when the medical professions were saying that you could use it, but it would be 5 years either side as to whether or not the age was
Yeah,
actually accurate or
yeah,
not.
yeah.
And
Well, yeah, but they also, I mean, most of the medical professionals, most of the medical bodies didn't approve of it.
no, of course not. No. And then with the AI, there were some reports which have been done around the fact that AI can potentially have some racial biases in there because it's not able to pick up on different features of people from different ethnic backgrounds as well.
But it's not
So
only that. I mean, it really is. At the moment, it's too inaccurate. But the
yeah,
question is,
yeah,
will it change? Will it get better? Will it have an inherent bias?
yeah,
Or can you train it not to have those biases? So that's the stuff they said they're going to come back to us
yeah.
on. And so let's see what they come up with. But, you know, the jury is definitely out.
Yeah. And in your your speech at that time as well, you were talking about the difference between border security and border force undertaking initial age assessments, to determine whether they were under 18 or not, compared to an actual social worker and being Merkin compliant and all of that, which I totally agree with and I support. And this has been a practice that's been going on for a while. Is there a way, do you think, that we as an organization can do more to try and change that practice or, strengthen a more coherent approach when they first arrive?
I think just making your voices felt
Okay.
about asking that it should be social workers,
Yeah.
ideally a social worker with an interpreter
Yeah.
who speaks the language of the person concerned,
Mm.
Merton compliant, but absolutely not border
Yeah.
officials, because they don't have the skills
No.
or the training or indeed the time.
No.
I
Absolutely
think that
agree
I
with
think
you.
that's the
Yeah.
other thing. It's a very instant thing. Now there are some circumstances, and we're not saying that border officials should have no involvement.
No, of
I
course
mean,
not.
clearly they're at the border,
Yeah.
but you know, if there is a dispute, then it seems to me it's really important to get a social worker
Because
involved.
we have seen an increase in young people who are being age assessed as adults and then being put and placed with
Well,
adults in
that's
hotels,
yeah,
etc., and so
put
forth.
into adult accommodation,
Yeah,
and the risk of that
as
is huge.
protection.
Now,
Yeah.
obviously, you can argue there's a risk the other way that people who are adults will get placed with children, and that's a risk there.
Yeah.
But I think that the evidence is it's more the other way. It's
Yeah.
more a risk to young people being
Yeah.
put with adults. So
Yeah.
I don't think there's a question there.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
we've rehearsed that endlessly in the House of
Yeah.
Lords, where between us, the group of us who are very concerned about this,
Yeah.
and it's been very interesting because it is quite cross-party, the concern about
Oh,
this.
good. Good. I'm glad to hear that. So without moving into the political arena, what do you think would be the implications or believe the implications would be of the recent and new policy announcements around restoring order and control and the direction it's taking in relation to safeguarding safe and legal routes for young separated refugees and asylum seekers? Is there scope for us to try and make sure that there is something in there for that, for young people?
I think the most important things that we're going to have to fight on. And look, do I want it to be moving in this direction? Clearly not.
No, yeah,
I think the question is, what can we persuade government to do? Again, that will have to be cross-party. I'm a crossbencher, I should say, that I'm an independent peer.
sure.
And that I think that what we need to talk about is family reunion for children, because I think that's
Yes,
hugely important.
agreed.
And we've already had one go at that, but I think we're going to need to do that again. I'm sure age assessment's going to come back.
Yeah,
I think the climate is such that it's going to become more and more negative
yeah,
generally about asylum and refugee. I think that is what is happening. It's happening all over the Western world, sadly.
yeah.
So I think we have to look at what are the if you like the moral compass points
Mm-hmm.
where we've got to fight it. And that seems to
Okay.
me, you can't say you you can't have family reunion, you can't have this, you can't have that, unless there is some safe and legal route for people who are really at risk of
Yeah.
considerable persecution. You cannot do that. And unless we're going to kind of come out of not only the European Convention, but the
Yeah.
Convention on Refugee Convention and so on, you still have to provide for those who are seriously at risk of persecution. So then the question is, how do you
Mm.
provide safe and legal routes? And when you provide safe and legal routes, who are you providing them
Yeah.
for? So it seems to me that for those of us who are particularly working around the issues around children and young people,
Yeah.
that's where we'll have to focus.
Agreed. And actually, Lord Alf Dubs, who's also a patron of KRAN, did an awful lot of work with the amendment that he introduced a couple of years ago. There was a commitment by all the governments, and yet they reneged on that commitment. And I'm just wondering, is there any way or scope to bring that back into the arena and into the play as part of safe and legal routes with the transition of
Well,
this new policy
I think
potentially?
I think we have to raise the safe and legal routes. Plainly, we do,
Yeah.
and I'm sure Alf will do it, and I'm sure Ruth
Yeah.
Lister will do it, and I will do it, and Sally Hamway and various other people will do it.
Yeah.
But the question is, what will government give on?
Yeah.
And I think there,
Mm.
I think I need to be careful now because I think there's some we'll have to do some negotiation.
Okay, yeah. I mean, in the bigger context as well, obviously the EU has this pact as well. They're introducing new legislation as well, which is
Yeah,
being
yeah, yeah. It's
very,
everywhere.
yeah, it's everywhere.
Everywhere.
And there's a tide
Everywhere.
moving in the wrong direction almost
Yeah.
completely.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah,
Absolutely. But you always have to remember that so one of the things that I always say is, yes, this is terrible. It is terrible. Absolutely terrible. But equally, when people like my mum came,
hmm.
if you look at what the Daily Mail was saying then, it was pretty damn
Yeah,
hostile. And
yeah,
you couldn't be a charge upon the state. So you had to, people had to
yeah,
support you or whatever.
yeah,
We have been there before.
yeah, we have, yeah,
So what do you do
yeah,
when we've been there before?
yeah,
To make whatever you can possible. And it
yeah,
seems to me it's that,
yeah,
because I don't want to, I want there to be safe and legal routes.
yes,
And we need to think what those safe and legal routes are going to be. And that some of that does to me uh, mean that you have to look at family reunion.
yeah, yeah. Very interesting. Brilliant. So, I mean, keeping on that kind of notion of values and morality from your previous publications about the morality of public policy and the state, um, what do you think we can do then to change that narrative and positioning of young refugees and asylum seekers in the UK? Because it seems is almost as if the policy debate has shifted to I mean, we say to pander to you know, the right wing, if you like, and the wider
Yeah.
discourse, even though the British Futures survey recently was saying that it's actually misunderstood and miscommunication in
Of course.
relation to migration.
Yeah. And we have seen this before, and of course it's really difficult for Labour because a lot of their voters are just as anti-refugee and asylum seeker as people who are naturally on the right. It's a complicated phenomenon which we're seeing throughout the Western world, as I said before.
Yeah.
I think one of the things we can do, which has been done at various points before, is show the immense contribution
Mm-hmm.
that asylum seekers and refugees have made to Britain.
Yeah.
And I think particularly more generally about immigration, point out that the NHS wouldn't work
Yeah.
without it.
Absolutely.
Couldn't manage, and that it's actually a really important, and who is going to do those
Mm-hmm.
jobs, and
Yeah.
that's what happens. So I
Yeah.
think there's a bit of telling the story of the contribution that
Yeah.
refugees and asylum seekers make is one of the things we're going to have to do. It won't sway the diehards who just don't like it,
No. No.
but it might sway the people
The
who
middle.
are
The bit. Yeah.
shifty,
Yeah. The middle.
the bit in
Yeah.
the middle.
Yeah.
And I always think that that's worth a try.
Yeah.
So I certainly would be doing that. I'd be telling the story, and I'd also be encouraging, young refugees and asylum seekers, and we do encourage them with
Mm-hmm.
our students to tell the story of what they've achieved.
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
Because I mean, my mother eventually, she wasn't famous at all, but eventually, her story is part of the National Life Story collection. because
Yeah.
she spent most of her life actually, eventually in the UK. She became a British subject in
Yeah.
1946. And she became, she was a proud monarchist with a very strong German accent. And my queen. It was really, I mean, it was touching, and I think that looking at what people do and what they contribute
Yeah.
is part of the story. And I know people always cite the Nobel Prize winners and whatever, but it isn't only about the Nobel
It's the
Prize winners.
people on the
My
ground who
It's
shift.
people on the ground. My mother ran, after she retired, my mother ran the over 60s employment exchange for Islington. You sort of think, hang on a minute, that is a great thing to do, but it's not exactly famous.
No. But it is those little acts, isn't it, that happen that
Yeah,
shift the dial in on the ground, with people. And we talk about courage, safe the courageous conversations that need to be had, in the local communities to help shift that dial. And your
absolutely.
mother is an example, as you are, of people who've been able to demonstrate that, you're able to contribute very comprehensively and effectively if given the opportunity and the chance, irrespective of your origins
Yeah, although
and
I think
not being.
I was born, after the war, and my dad was born in Britain. So I don't think I'm a good example. I think she was a good example.
Yeah,
She was the person who came and she made her life, and she felt she felt passionately British.
yeah.
After her parents died, she wouldn't speak German.
Wow.
She didn't speak German till her very last day,
Yeah,
actually.
yeah.
And then on her last day, she did speak German. But other than that, she didn't speak German.
No.
Yeah, she just and but she made a contribution, and the contribution was mixed. It was partly as a volunteer, and it's partly that she worked, and she was part of society. And I think it's something about telling the story
Mm-hmm.
of what asylum seekers and refugees bring.
Yeah.
So the NHS is a wonderful example of
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
I mean, of course, not everybody. I mean, a lot of people are economic migrants who've
Yeah.
come, but it's also equally people who, you know, who have come as refugees and asylum seekers and given to the NHS or to social care or to whatever area of society. We've got to tell that story.
Yeah.
And the young people, I think, and this is difficult for them because quite often they really want to be private. I mean, you can understand,
Yeah.
but I think they're going to have to tell the story of what they've been through.
Yeah, and that's part of our project with the youth ambassadors and the media
Yes.
ambassadors. So, like Rashan, who's a nurse and a citizen here now as well, but she started off coming over as a child refugee, and becoming, in foster care and working her way through the system and then achieving what she does. And so we do try and amplify that all the time. But what we don't want to do is have tokenistic stories, because there are some young people who really struggle because of the trauma, because of everything they've experienced. And for them, it's enough to just, yeah, it's enough for them just to survive, and be stable, as much as anything
Yeah.
else. Yeah. Okay, so one final question from me would be around what do you think organizations like KRAN can be doing to move forward in this current context? What would you advise organizations like us to do to try and shift that dial back, into a more humanitarian lens and way of looking at refugees and asylum seekers in
I
policy
think
and
it's very
media?
I think it's
And
very
the-
difficult. I
Yeah,
think it's telling the stories.
yeah,
It's telling the stories and and demonstrating the achievements,
mm-hmm,
and also being honest that for some people it's really hard,
yeah,
and they have been through huge persecution, and
yeah,
we do have an obligation
yeah,
to provide support for those fleeing
yeah,
persecution.
yeah,
But I think at the moment in this present debate, I would be doing everything I could to amplify as much as we can the contribution that asylum
okay,
seekers and refugees have made to Britain.
yeah.
That's what I would be doing.
That would be the best counter, I suppose.
Yeah, it's the
Yeah.
best counter that I can think
Mm.
of. I mean, and yeah, and we'll carry the battle on age assessment.
So we'll work in tandem, us on the ground and you in the House of Lords.
Yeah. Well, do you know what? It's much the same.
Well, thank you so, so much for your time today and for contributing
You're
to our
welcome.
podcast. It's been a real pleasure. Real pleasure.
And it's been lovely, really lovely talking to you, and all success to KRAN and to you personally. So fantastic talking to you.
Thank you
Take care.
so much, Baroness. So, thank you so much for listening to this latest podcast with Rabbi Baroness Julia Neuberger. As she says, it's about stories. It's about sharing stories. It's about sharing and demonstrating the achievements of our young refugees and asylum seekers, being honest about it and how hard it can be, but also about how we can show and demonstrate and change the narrative in the wider public discourse around refugees and asylum seekers by demonstrating and showing their contribution to life in the UK. Thank you so much for listening, and we look forward to you joining us for our next podcast.